We will now look at how energy moves through ecosystems. Energy is stored in chemicals in the bodies and wastes of organisms. This energy moves through ecosystems from one trophic level to the next. Food chains are diagrams showing the sequence of consumption from producers through various levels of consumers. Food chains represent the movement of energy between trophic levels. The arrows in the food chain represent the direction of energy flow. Let's look more closely at the diagram. Energy from the sun is incorporated into the grass by photosynthesis. When the grass is eaten by the grasshopper, energy stored in the grass is then passed on to the grasshopper. When the grasshopper is eaten by the shrew, energy from the grasshopper is passed on to the shrew, and then from the shrew to the owl. Also notice the trophic levels shown in the diagram: producers, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. Food webs show more complex feeding relationships in an ecosystem. They are composed of several food chains. One food chain shown in this web is the grass being eaten by the mouse, that is then eaten by the snake, which is then eaten by the hawk. Energy is passed from one organism to another. Now, look at the food web on this slide. Identify a food chain and label the trophic levels. Be sure to show the energy flow properly with the arrows. One food chain from this diagram is the seaweed, which is the producer, being eaten by the chitin, which is the primary consumer, which is then eaten by the crab, which is the secondary consumer, and then that is eaten by the seagull, which is the tertiary consumer. When diagramming this particular food chain, the arrows point from the seaweed to the chitin, to the crab, and then to the seagull. Remember, the arrows show the direction of energy flow. Another way to show energy relationships in an ecosystem is an energy pyramid, which may also be called a trophic pyramid. The energy pyramid shows the decrease in usable chemical energy available at each succeeding trophic level in a food chain. Notice the base of the pyramid is largest, indicating more usable energy is stored in producers than the other levels. To understand energy relationships in ecosystems better, let's discuss the first and second laws of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics, which is also known as the law of conservation of energy, states that energy is neither created nor destroyed in reactions, but can change from one form to another. There are several examples of energy conservation and transformations in this diagram. Look at the car example. The chemical energy stored in the molecules of the gasoline is converted to mechanical energy as the car moves. Some of the energy of the gasoline is also converted to heat energy. Notice, in 5 of the 6 examples shown here, that heat energy is produced. The total energy stays the same, just the form or the kind of energy changes. The second law of thermodynamics states that as energy transformations occur, the amount of usable energy decreases. Another way of saying this is that the ability of the energy to do work decreases. In most of the examples from the previous slide, we saw that an energy transformation occurred that produced a useful form of energy, such as the mechanical energy from the gasoline in a car engine. The mechanical energy allowed the car to move. But a byproduct of this energy transformation is heat energy, which is considered an unusable form. In living systems, as energy is transformed or passed along the trophic levels, some is lost to the environment as heat. Ecological efficiency is a measure of the useful energy produced in a transformation. It is the percent of usable chemical energy transferred from one trophic level to the next. The 10% rule states that only approximately 10% of the energy from one trophic level is passed on as usable energy. The rest is lost to the environment as heat. That means 90% of the energy stored in the tissues of grass is lost to the environment as heat when the grass is eaten by a rabbit. Only 10% of the grass energy actually is stored in the rabbit. Let's look at this energy pyramid. First, notice that the trophic levels are identified. We have producers, consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, and quaternary consumers. Then notice on the right side, the amount of energy in kilocalories per meter squared per year is shown at each trophic level. Which trophic level has the most energy stored in its tissues? The producers. Which trophic level has the least energy stored in its tissues? The quaternary consumers. Notice that each successive trophic level has 10% of the energy from the previous trophic level stored in its tissues. Where did the other 90% of that energy go? Look at the left side of the pyramid. Heat energy is given off at each transformation. So, how is the understanding of energy transformations relevant to a study of ecosystems? The amount of energy available determines how much life the ecosystem can support. The more energy available at the base of a food chain or trophic pyramid, the more energy available for organisms higher in the pyramid. This diagram is very interesting. It shows that of the 100% of energy coming from the sun into the photosynthetic producers, 99% passes through without being absorbed. Only 1% is absorbed by the producers. Of this 1% that is absorbed, 60% is lost to the process of respiration. Only 40% actually supports the growth and reproduction of the producers. Gross primary productivity is defined as the total amount of solar energy that producers capture through photosynthesis over a period of time. It can also be thought of as the rate at which producers convert solar energy into chemical energy. Net primary productivity is the gross primary productivity minus respiration. It's a measure of the actual amount of useful energy available to be passed on to the next trophic level. In the dandelion, the glucose produced during photosynthesis represents the gross or the total primary productivity. But some of that glucose is used by the dandelion in cellular respiration to drive its own cellular processes. The rest of the glucose is stored in the dandelion tissues and is available to the next trophic level, such as a rabbit that eats the dandelion. This amount of energy is the net primary productivity. In Table 12.1, we see several different ecosystems and their geographical area, mean plant biomass, and mean net primary productivity. Notice as the mean plant biomass decreases, the net primary productivity decreases. The tropical rainforest has the highest net primary productivity, and the desert shrub has the least. This graph also shows the average net primary productivity for different types of ecosystems. So, we can conclude that energy transformations are important factors in determining how productive ecosystems can be.